We're back.
All right, good morning. I am filling in for Lee out in Texas, so I'm going to do my best. If we go through the budget and there are questions that I can't answer or the department heads can't answer, I'll definitely be throwing those up the chain to Lee. He does a lot of the background numbers like utility, insurance, all those costs. So things that I can't answer, I'll give them to Lee. He's on standby. He will answer them ASAP, and we'll try to get them back to you guys, and we'll definitely have them by next week when we meet again, but hopefully sooner than that, and we'll distribute answers to everyone. And then any changes that we consider today, obviously we're not voting on anything or approving anything officially. This is a work session. If there are any changes that we know might be likely or needed, we'll keep a running list of those too, and we will make those changes, and we'll get you the substitution sheets next week. Eric was on the schedule today. He won't be here. He's actually out of town. And rather than try to have him zoom in and subject ourselves to technical difficulties and hitting that lag, he's going to come back next week and be in person. No public works and facilities today. Unless you just have some questions, I can go ahead and get to answer and be prepared, queue him up for next week. So we'll start with the narrative, and you don't have audited numbers for FY22 yet. We do have some preliminary numbers, which by all indications are continuing the trend of increasing revenues, and I'll get to that in 1 second. FY21 was a really good year. We ended up with quite a bit of extra money in the bank, about $1.3 million. And FY21 revenues and FY22 preliminary revenues seem to confirm the trend. One note about our increasing revenues is good and bad, but mostly good. A lot of our primary revenues are based on the prices being charged for things. The accommodations tax is a percentage of the price of rentals. Hospitality tax is a percentage of the price charged for food. Sales tax is a percentage, even property tax. But our big incomes, as inflation goes up, people charge more for those goods and services, and so the city makes more money because we're making higher. We're making a same percentage of a higher number. So in a way, we've kind of built in an inflation adjuster for our revenues because they're based on percentages of goods and services that are costing higher money. That's just kind of a note to set us up for the theme for this year. Is what we wanted to do is, very broadly speaking, take last year's expenses, plus them up for inflation, take last year's revenues, plus them up for inflation, and kind of in terms of recurring things, hold steady-ish, and say, we know that costs are going up, we know that our income is going up, we don't want to do anything too wild and crazy this year, but so we know how it works out. At the end of the year, we can say, okay, inflation went up 10%, revenues went up 10%, we're good, we're solid, let's go forth and do great things. So that's kind of a general thing, but there are some spins in here. Specifically the FY21 money. We're very fortunate to be in a great financial position as an entity. We have a good deal of money in the bank, including a $2 million emergency fund right now. And so since we cleared $1.3 million in FY21, we feel like maybe instead of just letting that money stay in the bank, we can use it for some sort of targeted special project or investment. And the mayor's proposing a slight increase to the emergency fund just to build that up, because it's always good to build it up, but maybe not sink all the money in there. And then the rest of it towards grant matching dollars, which could be used for drainage improvements, the water main, property acquisition, a variety of things. Our redundant water main project was originally proposed to cost $3.5 million. That was a couple of years ago now. We submitted the grant application last spring, and then second one last summer. So that price has probably gone up. So any money we can set aside as a match for that's good. And then we've got our island-wide drainage study sitting out there with several $1 million worth of projects. There's a ton of money soon to be made available at the state, around $800 million. And so we hope that by using some of FY21's surplus, put in that grant matching account, we can leverage it to get a lot more money for different things. We don't necessarily have specific projects right now, but knowing that we had, say, $1 million in grant matching sitting out there, we could leverage that for $3, $4, $5 million of grant funds. Just some examples of the benefit of building up that fund. We got a call from the Office of Resiliency last week, and they were actually going down the list. They've been proactively reviewing grant applications, and they said, hey, we see that the city has a brick award, building resilient infrastructure award. We'd like to pay you back your match. And so they called us, and then we're going to get refunded our matching funds for the 12th, the Tabby Drive and West Indian Flooding Project that they were talking about a couple months ago. And so I was rushing before this meeting, sent them 4 or 5 other things we're planning to do. I said, hey guys, these are what we're working on. We know, I'm not asking you for the match for the planning right now. We've already planned it. We're going to build these things, and we want to build these things. Can we match them? So there's a ton of money out in the world. So this budget definitely, you'll see, high investments in grant matching and capital acquisition. But our theory is that now's the time. There's more money available probably than there ever will be again. With a 1-page application, I hope later this week to get us $150,000 from the state. That's just sitting there waiting for us, and they basically call us and said, this is yours. Here's your 1-page application for it. So having money to match that kind of thing is going to be really important. So that's the theme throughout the budget. Another thing is that Lee is very eager, and I believe we're legally required pretty soon to have spent down our GEO bond funds. So there's about $550,000 left of those funds, and he's got it right now split. Pretty sure they're highlighted in green throughout the budget. Most of it went to public works and facilities. And it's kind of split between stormwater, PEDPAPs, and a little bit of city hall work. The actual bond itself was for those 3 things. So Lee has the remaining funds split out, proposed to be spent in those 3 categories. This budget redistributes what used to be the IT department budget, and that is spread along through the budget. I'm just going to confirm what I'm about to tell you. The place you're really going to see that is in contracts. Throughout the budget in each department, you'll see contracts listed in blue. So those are things that have moved from IT. And what we did to kind of give an apples comparison is he rebuilt those sheets. So there was not a huge jump in FY23, and this is a pure example. In administration, we added $100,000 almost in contracts, but rather than show a $100,000 growth in administration contracts, he back priced those IT items into the contract sheet, so you can see how much it really grew for didn't grow. Not artificial growth because of moving IT contracts. That's what I'm trying to say. One recurring expense that is in this budget that looks outside of our recurring generally increasing revenues is the addition of 2 full-time firefighters, and Andrew and Rocky can comment on that later. And that recurring expense is proposed to be offset with a recurring revenue increase with a $2 million property increase. And I believe those full-time firefighters cost around $185,000, and that $2 million, which is the highest we could legally go, is about $170,000. And then moving out of the general fund, we'll come back to the water fund. And the big thing in the water fund is accelerating the automated readers. That project's been going really well. It's been on the council's strategic plan. Kyle's done a great job of overseeing that. I believe they're up to over a third of the total already, maybe close to half. It's really going a lot faster and a lot smoother than we thought. And then just some other general highlights. In general government, $300,000 for grant matching. We're looking to make a big contribution to the beach fund, again, based on those increased state A taxes and local A taxes of $1.4 million. Normally we go about $1 million, so this year we're bumping up to $1.4 million. That would leave $200,000 roughly made available to the A tax committee for tourism programs. There is an 8% cost of living adjustment across all citywide departments.
Except city council.
Except city council. You guys have to vote on that one separately.
That's in expenditures, correct?
Yes, sir. And that's built into every department, and that's to acknowledge the overall inflation in the economy, which at the time this was done was at 8.5%. And again, we hope that the revenues demonstrate that the revenue growth is steady and strong enough to support that increase.
What estimate on the revenue side of it, this adjusted for inflation based on conservative estimates, was that a consistent figure throughout month to month, or was it just an overall percentage?
For the A-tax and hospitality tax in general, and we've got a special worksheet there for it. What he did is he took the actual numbers that we have for the months that we already have, and then he plus the rest of the months that we don't have. He took last year's numbers plus 5%.
Plus 5%, okay.
Public safety budget, Andrew and Rocky are there, and they can discuss that for you. And then the public works, got $100,000 set aside for stormwater and drainage funds. And again, those could be direct spends or leveraged as grant matching. $275,000 of the geo bonds for pedestrian paths. 25,000 new, new's kind of the wrong word. $25,000 not coming from the bond, but just a straight expenditure for design and engineering, and that would be for the First Street section. And then a big number here, $125,000 to supplement our current budget for Arctic Avenue. And we'll be presenting that to you guys at the May City Council meeting. But really, the shortest version is that both of the bids indicate that we need to spend significantly more than we planned if we want to get a full complete study. So $25,000 that we put in the budget and bid out basically gets us a concept with very little detail, and to actually drill down and do an entire full scope of work that we propose. It's more like $125,000 to $150,000. So you'll see that at the May council meeting. And I do believe that if we choose to rebid that with a higher number, we'll get a lot more responses. So reading through and talking to some people, I think that our budget, basically people ignored it. So that's that. And then there's $175,000 to add to our existing money, which is about $340,000 for the stucco and exterior repairs at City Hall. And then, the last paragraph is short, but it actually highlights two kind of important policy changes we're proposing through this budget. The first relates to city contributions to healthcare premiums. This year, we're getting an 18.1% cost increase from the state on our side. We're not proposing to pass any of that to the employees this year. What we'd like to do is, going forward, change the compensation rate for healthcare. We have a very generous healthcare policy here as employees. The city pays 100% of a single employee, and then a percentage of married or full family coverage. And in the very beginning, that percentage was tied to the amount the city pays for a single employee. But over time, as these increases have come and they've been split between the employer and employee, the numbers kind of diverged. And today, two employees earning the same salary are compensated very differently, because an employee on full family, the city pays about twice as much for their health care as they would a single employee. So the total compensation for the same job is radically different based on just the healthcare premiums. So we're proposing that going forward, grandfathering all people who currently work for the city, because that's how they were hired, but going forward, that the city pay 100% of a single employee, and that dollar amount towards spouse and full family. So it's no longer a percentage, it's an amount equal to a single employee full coverage. And that would be for new employees going forward.
How is that going to be? Who's going to keep track of all that?
Well, we already have practice doing that, because we've got different classes of retirees.
Okay.
I'm a different class than Wes. So we've already got kind of tracking classes by hire date, and that's what we do. We just track it through the HR software. We can just put in there hire date equals X or greater, and it calculates it out. So that's one. And then another one that probably doesn't, not even in here. Well, another one that's built into this budget, it's not in this paragraph, is a little change to the cell phone stipend program. Right now, you either get a city cell phone, or some folks elect to keep their own personal phone and get a stipend. And the stipend is, again, something that's kind of been determined over time at different departments, different rates, and so it kind of varies up and down. Not everybody gets the same stipend. So this would even it out So that everyone who gets a cell phone stipend gets $53 and some change a month. And that roughly equals what the city pays for each city cell phone, plus averaging out the cost of the new phone, I think, every 3 years. So that would be, anyone who gets a stipend, right now, I believe some different people get different rates. And this would just even it out at $53 to reflect the cost of the city cell phone. So that's kind of what we hope the numbers in this book back up those things.
One thing that Aaron mentioned about the firefighters that be coming up later, that's my idea. I'm the one that put that in there, put it in their heads to go for it. But that brings us up, and we'll talk about it later, that'll bring us up to 3 full-time people per shift. So it gets eliminates some more part-time folks that don't show up during storms and times we need them instead of they go to their home. Just so you know when Chief Burke and Chief Joe get here that I'm the one that did that. So if you holler at anybody, holler at me. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Aaron, follow-up question on Billy's question regarding inflation. So in a typical year, when we budget for inflation in a way that would accrete to our revenues, what is that versus the 8% we're using now? I suspect it's probably 3.5%. So I'd be curious if it is going from 3% to 8%. What does that equal in dollars? So we have new revenues coming in, which on the back end we're going to, because we have a balanced budget, be spending in the form of expense. My concern, of course, is if there's a Fed representative here, they would say inflation's transitory. It's up now, but it's going to come back down. So the price you pay, at the pump, in restaurants, what have you, is not going to be permanently elevated. It will come back down at some point to more normal levels. Well, I don't know. Like for instance, if you charge
Any food place, once you start charging the price for food.
Yeah, unless others are able to, and then you have to respond to competition, that sort of thing. But so I'm just like, as a hypothetical, if that equaled $500,000, but we get to a steady state in the future during the budget year, that it's more like 250, we have a shortfall that we have to solve for.
Right. So I'm definitely going to run that up the chain of lead. Yeah. But I think, am I correct in interpreting it, is to find out how much of this revenue growth is inflation and how much of it is he using as his kind of base true growth? Because even after this year's inflation, we've seen steady growth. We've got some charts here. So you just back out last year. In general, we've been very lucky as a community that our revenues have been going up. So I'll ask Lee, what's the difference between your standard up and this plus?
Well, think about it this way too. You use real numbers to April, well, to March. So those are real numbers that he's using. From that March on, or I guess it's March, had to be March. He only took last year's dollars and increased it by 5%. That's what you said, 5%, right? Not 8%. So it's 5%. Which is more conservative. Yeah. So those numbers before that are real numbers, and last year's numbers was real numbers.
And he's based off of actual, and then projection.
Yeah, I feel much better.
And 5% I think is very conservative.
And the 8% is the COLA proposed to match the 8.5% inflation as of March. To keep our baseline salaries the same value. But I'll clarify with him just throughout what number he used. I know that 5% is what he used for the A-tax and H-tax, and I'll ask him what he used for all the other revenues.
I'm sure.
And then to sort it out, how much is him, if there were no inflation, how much would he have bumped them up anyway for true growth? Is that accurate? Right. So, kind of carrying on right from there on that first summary page, you'll see that this year's budget is proposed to be balanced at $10,131,710 in, and $10,131,710 out. Overall, let's do this again. Make sure the number's right. And that doesn't include the milk increase.
Are you on the first page?
Yes, sir, where it's just got the top line summary. I'm just double checking my math here.
where it says general government,
Yes, sir. So that's a 9.3.
Yeah, you're right behind me.
So that's 9.3 higher revenues and expenses from last year. So that would include all of these adjustments plus the mill increase. And then looking backwards to FY21.
I don't understand it.
Okay, so on this first page, this is the summary page of the whole budget, and it gives the top line expenses of each department and the top line revenues.
I see that total expenses,
Right.
8,
So we're looking at FY23, which is the last column on the right.
okay,
So 10,131,710. That's how much Lee anticipates us spending, and right below it, that's how much we anticipate to make.
alright, so
Balanced budget.
our next budget is 10.1,
Yes, sir. And then looking backwards at the blue in FY21, we wanted to adjust this back. So the actual numbers in each one of these would be about $2.7 million higher. But that was bond money. So what he did is, to the best of his ability, he backed out the bond money, kind of get what the budget was that year minus the bond money, which was 8.4 rounded expenses and 9.7 revenue. So we cleared, absent the bond money, we cleared 1.3 in FY21, and that's what gives us some wiggle room for it.
you said, okay,
Go ahead.
So, are you saying that it was actually 8,443 expenses, but the revenues came in
Way high.
$1,300,508,
Mm-hmm.
and so what is that? What were you saying about the bond?
So those.
Does that have the same thing? Are they both related?
Yeah, sure. So in our FY21 budget, the actual real numbers would be about $2.7 million higher on both those lines, because we issued a bond and we got money, and then we spent a lot of that bond money. But Lee wanted to pull aside the bond money, which kind of is money in, money out. It washes each other. So when you take away the money that came into the bond and the money that got spent in the bond, and take away what's left over from the bond that we haven't spent, these blue numbers represent more the actual in and out beyond the bond. And so we cleared $1.3 million.
I don't get it.
It's kind of like,
In reality, we're still spending the money.
mm-hmm.
We received it all at once.
So we're still spending it.
We didn't spend it all at once.
I don't get it. It's almost like you're speaking a foreign language.
Okay, so I'll try again. So let's say the actual budget in 2021 was $9,443,000, and the actual spend was revenues were $10,700,000, right? But that was only because someone wrote the city a check for $1 million, and then we turned around and wrote them a check for $1 million back. So what Lee did is he took that money out, because that was just money in and money out. And because it came in, it went right back out. It's accounted for. So those are the numbers absent the money we got and the money we spent right back. We had special income that year, and he backed that out along with the associated expenses.
So if you were figuring the budget for your company, and you figured that you were gonna spend $100,000, but then you got $500 loan for a new piece of equipment, and you went right out and spent the $500, that wouldn't be part of, you wouldn't figure that loan as part of your income. See what I'm saying? So that's what Lee did. He took the loan, the GO bond loan number out of the real number.
The 2,700,
2.7 million.
Yeah, okay, 2.7 million. So what did he do?
He took that 2.7 million out of the numbers, so these are more realistic numbers.
Okay.
Minus the loan.
Because we got 2.7 for a loan for City Hall.
Well, for different things in that bond, but we're spending it as we go along. So he just took that out because he got a loan for a car, he bought a car, so that's not really income into the business.
So, I mean, I could add 2.7 million to both those numbers, total expenses and total revenue. And that would reflect the actual traffic of money, okay? I get it now, thank you.
While we're on that, I have a question. So we're putting half of the 1.3 million left over, we're putting half of it in the emergency fund, half of it for water. And we're also gonna use all of our available ARP money for water as well. Is there, that's a lot, and that's fine, because that is one of our vital needs. But we also, we were talking about the commercial rezoning, one of the big things that I brought up, and I seem to have plenty of some head nods. We have to fix the drainage issue. The biggest drainage issue is on Center Street. If we're allowing other stuff to be built on it, I really think we should pocket some of that, and maybe this current year's leftover money to the drainage side of things. Is there any thought about maybe moving, instead of both of those pots going for water, maybe one of those to drainage to kind of get that going as well? Because we need to do, they're both vital, and they're both need to kind of be done simultaneously. But especially we know that one was, $2.5 million for the Center Street project. And that was our most vital one, but there's other ones that need to be done as well. I think we should put some of that, we should keep that fund going up as well, because we're gonna need to do that one relatively fast if we're doing this commercial rezoning. I'd like to see it, a little tied close together.
And we have confirmed that ARP money is available for stormwater projects too. And so if it kind of all goes broadly into the grant matching pot, then you guys can decide later how to break it up between stormwater.
Gotcha. So we're not tied to this. It's just going in there, but it's kind of listed this way in here. That's what it doesn't seem like there's any room for that. But if you're saying there is at a later date, then that's fine.
Yeah.
That's why both of them need to be built up.
Right.
So it's kind of
Maybe just change the name of the title of that line, from just water and wastewater, water and
Water and drainage.
drainage.
water two-way.
Water coming in, water going out.
And, stormwater, drainage, I lost my point, but it can, the ARP money specifically can be used for stormwater.
I say when here it says currently earmarked, I just want to make sure we have the ability, for both, because they're drainage, it's gotta go out, so I guess gotta come in.
What sentence page is that?
I'm looking right here in your narrative before you get to the expenditure highlights. I mean, obviously the one where what we're talking about, the 1.3 million we're setting aside, for doing the water gas project and the emergency fund. And then the last line that carries the next page, the recent and future funds for the Federal American Rescue Plan Act are spending 1.3, which is currently embarked for the installation of water main projects. And we're gonna receive money for Charleston Water Systems for it. So everything's going to water and we're getting other help for it. Something, as long as we can use it for drainage, that's all I'm making sure at a later date.
I'll fix that line here, and definitely in this budget, it doesn't commit it to one particular project. I think, as we start getting the details of that $800 million, and we find out how the different matches work out, we may find that there's some projects where we only have to put 25%, for example, that, don't say too many because I can do the math, but $2 million project for Center Street would only cost us $500,000.
Right. What's the total of what did we get repaid back for the two, from the Tabby Street and the other one that, that group's gonna put a release?
We're getting our match for the planning stage back, and it's about $20,000. So we had to pay $20,000 as a match for them to do that study, and now the state's gonna reimburse us our match. And we're confident that we'll then be able to apply for construction funds.
Using that money again, and just using it for.
So that was the top page. Then we just got a chart showing the overall broken budget. We're now at a 10-year tracking, a pie chart showing the percentages, and these don't change too much year to year. Then up right at the top here, we've got our reserve accounts. This will just give you guys an idea about how much we have in our reserves, our various reserves, plus what we anticipate rolling in from FY22. So as we go through the budget, we wonder how much do we have in reserve for Beach Marsh legal acquisition. We we can just add up the 3/31/22 balance with the FY 22 anticipated number, and then we're done. And then we've got some FY 23 budgets in here too, that we'll get to them as we go. But this is a handy page, which I think we'll refer to several times, to see how much we have saved up for various things. And then the last page here is one tab. It's just the forecast, and this is where I'll touch base with Lee. You know, how do these annual forecasts compare with this year's budget? Just see what percentage you do. Each department has those, and that was just a straight formula that he did. I'll get the details here.
Just a quick note here too. The 23 budget revenue forecast is a 7% increase over the 22 budget forecast. So that is in line with what you're asking for from an 8% increase. Even from a budget, if that makes sense. On the front page. 10 million divided by 9.4. That gives you a 7% increase from prior year budget to forward year budget.
So what are you saying?
Just right here on the full year 22 budget.
What is that?
On this spreadsheet right here, third page. Third page there, the second to the right column, the full year 22 budget. Full year 22 budget and the full year 23 budget. This is what we're working on, 23 budget. He's asked for revenue of 10 million. And current year budget, which is 9.4 million, there's almost a 7% increase between these two. So that's a safe number, I think, when you're asking for increases and spending. That makes sense.
You mean like in terms of keeping up with inflation?
Correct. Correct. Just what you want to make sure that you got the revenue, and we're going to on 22. It looks like we're going to overachieve.
I think we're
Looking at 21.
Yeah, I think we're going to overachieve again this year. You guys will have the same opportunity to look at some investments.
It's a good thing.
Aaron, could you please do that thing that you did with the general fund reserve? You use an example. Will you do another one? Because I was trying to keep up with you.
Yeah. So on that list of reserves, the last column is FY 23, and these are some things you already know. But the next two columns back, he's got your March 22 balance. So we just use the first line, the reserve for employee development. As of March 2022, that reserve has $11,200 in it. He anticipates that when we close out fiscal year 22, an additional $4,800 is going to go in that. So that gives us
an additional 4,800, or the total is going to be 4,800.
No, there's an additional, because we budget money into the reserve. We budget money for these things every year, and then we spend out of it, so they don't always increase. They do increase. That's the FY 2022 at the end of the year. That's how much more money will be added to that March balance.
So for say employee development, the actual balance last month was 11,200. Was the actual cash.
Right.
So he's saying at the end of 22, it's going to be 4,800 because you anticipate spending whatever the difference of 11,200 minus 4.
No, sir. He's going to say at the end of 22, after he nets out what we spent and what we budgeted this year, there'll be $4,800 left over to add to that reserve, so that the beginning balance in FY 2023 will be 16,000. So that's the anticipated. He doesn't do those until the end of the year when he finds out how much money is left. So for each one of these 3/31/22 balances, if he is currently projecting that we will add to those balances at the end of the year, it'll be by that much.
Okay, so everything in the FY 22 budget anticipated net contribution, that's in addition to what we already have now, because the year's not over yet.
Right.
I got it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So that gets us to the revenues. Let's see. I don't know how you guys want to do this, but a lot of these, he's just priced up or down based on the actuals. Some of the actuals are thrown off. We'll go kind of line by line, and then you guys just let me know if you have any specific questions. Right there, Geo bond proceeds, $550,000. That's money we already have that he has to reflect as revenues. That's the bond money. Hospitality, local, state, A-tax, those are backed up by the worksheet that's 1, 2, 3 pages back. And I apologize, it's small enough that I have trouble reading it.
You can magnify, a big magnify.
Honestly, even if I stand this far away. But what he's done is he's used the actual numbers that we have year to date, those are in blue. And then for March, April, May, and June, which we don't have reported yet, he's taking last year's number and plus them up 5%. I'm gonna check that math right now. After I put this up, I can read it.
So you mean 2021 actual is what we've actually spent?
So these are revenues, and if you give
Oh,
me-
or yeah, actually brought in.
Yeah, just 1 second, I'm gonna check the math, I have to blow it up. Yeah, focus on it. Yeah, so, over on the FY23 budget side on the right, the blue numbers let you see actual comparisons. So last July, we made 187 in local A tax, this year it's 269. If you go through, the majority of these are up, and they're up significantly. January was off with a 76 versus 40, but the rest of them are up pretty significantly so far this year. Those numbers are, August was 165 versus 256. October was 92 versus 139. November 53 versus 97. So year to date, we're having a phenomenal year in these revenues. And then for the purple fields there, he just took last year's actuals and plus them up 5%. So that's where he gets his projected state, local, A-tax, sales tax, and hospitality tax numbers. Even the hospitality tax numbers, they're a little more up and down, but they are overall consistently. They're overall net gain, and there's more purple there because he has fewer actual numbers.
It looks to me like, the hospitality can go up a little bit. I know it's conservative, so I know it can. But, just looking at how much it's gone up, why are you keeping the number close to the same?
Yeah, I can ask Lee.
Let's just put a star by that one if we need some money later. I'm not gonna lie, I'd like to have a police officer for this budget.
So you're saying the actual for last year was 820, 715 for the hospitality tax?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was budgeted this year to be 858, 644. Is that correct?
Well, he's actually projecting 888, 374. That's the last tax.
I got 888, 375 for 2023
Right, yep.
hospitality tax transfer. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So last year it was budgeted 858, 644.
Don't see where that.
I'm on hospitality tax transfer.
Mm-hmm.
It's directly to the left of it.
So in the 2022 budget, are you saying that the budgeted amount was 858, 644? We're not,
You're on the top sheet. You're on the top sheet. Okay. So
Yeah, I'm on the
still
top.
on the worksheet.
because we haven't collected them all yet,
Right.
so
Correct. But yes, you're right.
So he anticipated we bring in 858, 644.
Yes, sir.
So, and the year before, we actually brought in 820, 715.
Right. Yep. Sir.
Okay, so he's putting 888.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like about almost a 3.
10%. 9,666,666.
I'll tell you. You already, and so that increase is based on the actual numbers he has, plus the remaining of the months up 5%.
Good. What now? What did you just say?
So 3 pages behind the top sheet,
Mm-hmm.
and they're very tiny, so they're hard to read. There's 2 charts. It's this year's budget and the FY21 collections, which is the ones he has. And so there's 2 highlights. There's blue and there's purple. So the blue months, those are the actual city receipts. So looking over at the hospitality tax, you can see that in July of 2020, we brought in $77,900. In July of 2021, we brought in 96. So those blue numbers are actual income for those months.
Let's do it this way. If you look at 21 actual and 22 budget, the difference in those 2 numbers is 0.9558%. If you look at the difference, what he did was he took the difference between 22 budget and added 0.96666. And then that's what he gives you for the budget for 23. So he said it went up 9% from 21 to 22, so he's just saying, well, it should go up that much going forward. I'm sure that's what he was saying. It just works out that way.
Yeah, and how we back it up, Eddie, see, we used the real numbers that we had, and then for the rest of the months, we took last year's numbers plus 5%. For a total increase of about 10%. Because we're having a really strong performance here today, the numbers we do have.
Revenue.
For all the hospitality, local, state accommodations tax. Property taxes, plus up a little. And
They should be going up with the,
he's got, in the supporting schedule, I believe, notice here in the revenues, if you go back, 1, 2, 3.
cause then we just have assessment.
And he's got, in his worksheet, it's here in the back, there's a worksheet for property tax, and that'll walk you through his calculations of how he projected the property tax. He's got the most latest and greatest information from the assessor with the property values, and so he did his thing, and this is his math.
Is there a millage rate increase?
So yes, sir. This budget does propose a 2% millage rate increase.
What's the max that you can do by state law? 3%?
No, 2. We're capped. 2's at our cap.
Okay, and you're raising it too?
It's proposed to, yes, sir. And we'll talk more about that when we get to public safety.
Okay.
So, guys, I'm just going to skip down to some of the revenues I want to highlight. You got state aid, the subdivisions. This is budgeted at 65. If you look back through time, you'll see that we're really kind of whatever the state gives us, we get. There is a formula built into law, but they don't stick to it, so we don't know.
Yeah.
Hopefully this year with that large state surplus, we might actually see our full funding, but we don't know. Sales taxes and accommodations taxes are all in that backup. I want to come down all the way to business licenses.
How does the alcohol tax go down? There's no way it's going down from last year.
Well, the last year that we
Forget
had
about the 2021, obviously with the pandemic, we were shut down for a while, but then it jumped right back up.
all right, and I will ask you.
You should know that.
I know, that's what
That's what I'm
I'm saying. There's no way it's going down.
So what you're saying, it ought to be at least 50.
Yeah.
Just even
100%.
across. Okay.
Yeah, at least 50 just to keep it. That's being modest.
Right.
Because that's another one there where our prices have gone up, so we've raised prices, so it's naturally it's going to jump up, probably pretty significant.
Meaning that their gross receipts are gonna be higher
Yeah.
everywhere, yeah.
So, I'm moving down to business licenses, you'll see he's got that at 800, which is significantly lower than last year's budget. I apologize, the March 22 numbers aren't on this sheet, but we're sitting at right now, we'll get this March 22 column added, but we're sitting right now at business licenses at about $368,000. And normally we would have almost all of our business license revenue by now because of renewal season, but that's been pushed. It's been pushed again now with the county portal indefinitely down. That's, you haven't heard that yet. So what we did is we went back and said, Lee, can you go back the last few years and see what we normally bring in between the middle of December and the middle of February to kind of capture that renewal season? And he averaged it out, and we've only got 368K in hand in March 2022. I don't know the exact number. He told us it's around 600. So we're looking at $900,000 or less probably this year. And we know next year there's a couple, King's Flats really boosted us this year with their townhomes. So we're anticipating a decrease. And, in the past, we consistently under budgeted this. We came in way over. That 2021 number of $1 million, way higher than the 2021 budget, but it got some of the checkpoint. And then
A lot on the checkpoint.
but then we budgeted 915 in 2022, and we think we're going to come in right around 900, and then we've got some things dropping off. So just in the spirit of conservative budgeting, we walked that one back all the way to $800,000.
And we have increased budget or building permits percentage wise over the past 5 years.
Both the business licenses and the building permits have been going up over time.
Correct.
But that $800,000 in business licenses, there was considerable bit of back and forth, but we felt like, even though we know we have a history of under budgeting it, to just be ultra conservative.
I got you.
So how much do you think it's under budgeted?
Well, in the past, for example, and as you can see back beyond 2020, you'd see more, but in 2020 we budgeted 650, we brought in 735. 2021 is kind of weird because we budgeted 835, but that $1 million, we had a few months of checkpoint, which really was what bonanza for the city in terms of business licenses. So that's the fluke. But if you could go back in time beyond 2020, we consistently were.
What do you mean a checkpoint?
We had a checkpoint where we stopped all people coming onto the island.
In 21? I thought that ended in.
Fiscal year 2021.
Oh, started in July, right.
So, in the
Yeah.
we in the time we had the checkpoint, we caught like 300 people who
Yeah.
didn't have licenses. So it was a big year for licenses because we caught a lot of folks at the checkpoint who were coming out to work with different kind of licenses. But if you could look backwards beyond 2020, like 2019, 18, 17, we normally under budgeted that, so we've been a little bolder in our predictions. But this year we want to make sure we're safe. So that's where both building permits and business licenses come in. Franchise permits holding steady. We don't really normally see a big variation in those. Skipping all the way down here to parking tickets. Again, I apologize, I don't have the 2022 column on here, but with our new parking enforcement crew, we've seen a higher volume of parking tickets, and so Lee feels that 250,000 is a good number for parking ticket revenue.
Look at, you see what I'm looking at?
Yeah.
250 is dropping the bucket.
Well, they're just gonna say that the 221 number, that's also a fluke, because that caught all this 2021 number, that caught all the $150 emergency ordinance tickets. So that really bumped it up. I do have, give me 1 second, apologize. I do have, I don't think it breaks it down. This did incorporate the latest the latest and greatest from the parking company. They sent me over their numbers.
Are they gonna be at any of these, Jared?
And we can invite him next Monday.
Okay. I mean, just maybe at the end, just in case, cause I have some questions for the parking guys, just to kinda shake their tree a little bit.
All right. I will get the latest financials they sent over and I'll get those to you guys. So, parking ticket, and that's not paid parking, that's actually parking violations, tires on the road, fire hydrants, crosswalks, that sort of thing. Then on the back page, you'll see that paid parking is also projected to go up from $760 in budget last year to $800,000 next year. And nothing really, I don't think there are any really major things. Those are kind of the revenue highlights. So anything I can follow up on, Lee, right now I got the alcohol tax, parking tickets. You want to throw paid parking?
Throw it in there too, yeah, just to get a better, they can be both up or annually low.
So we do feel right now that this is a conservative revenue number, in the theory that it's better to be safe than sorry rather than aim for the stars with your revenue and then come up short. So we feel like that $10,131,000 is strong in the sense that it's conservative, so we're gonna need it.
I bet we're gonna come in over
So we've got
on a few of the same.
a few charts there. Again, these, the next chart with the unrestricted and reserved cash, you'll see that over time, in the last five years really, we've gone from about $3 million cash in the bank up to almost $7 million. So we have a good track record of responsible spending, strong revenues, and really saving up money for our long-term needs in the various reserves. I think that this is good. We're very fortunate, guys, to be well positioned financially as an entity. Just some charts on the various tax collections.
Aaron, here is our allocation for ride sharing. I remember seeing that on, is that a miscellaneous income? Just there?
I think it actually has a name.
That's got to be going up every year with adoption. So we see people getting picked up and dropped off out here, left to right.
Yeah, it's the local assessment fee for ride share. And he's got 8,000 budgeted. It looks like in 2021 we made in 2021 we made $2,800.
Hey guys, if you're gonna talk about something, talk about it so everybody can hear, which is a good thing. You ask a question, he's trying to answer your question, you have a side conversation.
So in 2021 it went way down to 2,800, and he's got, we budgeted 9,000 last year. I'm gonna have to get the March 22 number, but I believe it's in the low thousands. And I think part of the reason is that Ubers are still out. Well, this is just anecdotal in my experience. It's been a lot harder to find an Uber lately. It's not as easy as it used to be. But I'll ask him to confirm that.
That was what our sidebar was about. It's got a lot harder for people to get, especially out here with the traffic, just the distance. You're more working this place like downtown, and you can get them a lot easier, but out here it's gotten a lot harder. So that may be possible.
So flipping through the charts, we've got the A tax, the H tax, the property. Interesting property tax information. And the first one is as a percentage of revenues, and this kind of goes back to.
I'm sorry, where are we at?
We're behind the revenues are a series of charts. We've got fiscal year cash, which I talked about. The cash has been going up.
You mean the charts behind the revenue sheet, the general fund revenue?
Yes, sir.
Which one are you on right now?
So
Keep going to the property.
So it's blue and green, it says property tax as a percentage of revenues.
Ooh, right here, all right.
And so this, I have to say it, my job. So as we've grown our variable tax collections, we've been lucky to not have to really look at some of our more fixed and steady things like property taxes. Generally speaking, we've been able to avoid mill increases, and that's kind of reflected here in this budget. That since 2011, the property taxes, our primary sort of fixed income was 49% of our budget, and today it's 27% of the budget. So over time, as we've been fortunate to not increase the property taxes, they're also going down and showing that our primary fixed revenue is not supporting as much budget as it used to be. Just for information. And on the next page, we have property taxes as adjusted for inflation. You'll see that they have increased since 2011, but I'm just going to say that translates to $2.3 billion instead of that. So in 2011, adjusted for inflation, property taxes were about $2.3 million, and today, next year's budget, they're proposed to be about $2.5 million. So we've been holding the line on property taxes, which I think all of the residents appreciate.
And Aaron, that's a function of the recent reassessment.
How do you
The fact that the revenues increased a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
Associated with property. So to the extent that a home, let's say, is appraised, we always know that appraisals, well, they tend to be lagging actual values. So if a home was appraised for 1.5 million, but it sells for 2.25 million, is that immediately accommodated in the appraiser's office as the new value of the house going forward?
I'll have to ask that.
Because I know people can appeal the value if they don't think it's accurate, but it's hard to appeal if that's what you paid.
Yeah, I'll ask that. I know there's a cap on how much property taxes can go up, so even if you sold it, I'll ask. But that way,
We know prices are rising rapidly, and in some cases 25% plus per year. So that could create a good problem to solve for.
What are you saying?
Well, for instance, I want to say for some people in the past 5, 6, 7 years, their home values have doubled in price. So there's an assessed value, and all of the homes are recently reassessed.
Mm-hmm.
But if the actual sale price of the property is considerably more than the assessed value, I don't know, but the assessor could look at it and say, we need to adjust this because the actual value of the home is closer to what was recently paid for it.
Well, I mean, I guess that would happen when the county does reassessment again on their schedule.
Yeah, they will,
I mean,
I don't know, but I agree with Eddie, I don't think they do it, every so many years.
But, yeah, but the corollary is, I know that, and this is personal experience, when I purchased my home, I paid less than the assessed value, and I appealed it, and they honored my purchase price, which was lower than the assessed value, because that was the reality.
Yeah, but they're not gonna, just because you appeal it, they're not gonna sit there and go through every one of your sold.
not everybody, they'll only address the people that start the process of appeal, right? That's how they get red flagged to
I mean, I'm sure,
adjust your assessment
we can ask the question,
on an individual,
I'm sure it's because you started the process, not because they come and said, oh, well, congratulations.
because that's
We're gonna
significant.
help
We
you
don't
out.
want people that are out there selling their house in a hot market to be able to affect. But those of us that aren't selling, we don't care what the market is doing, really. I mean,
right. I'll ask them how quickly, maybe it's the next tax year. I'll find out.
The one that really crossed me is like, not the next one, but the next one. And it's not like we can do anything about it, yeah.
Yeah, so there is a chart here showing the property tax payments of James Island, and that's another one. We just want to always bring before council. That's an ongoing and ever increasing obligation that we cannot escape. I think we have 17 more years of that payment. And there's a backup sheet where we calculated that, and that's just us paying the PSD for the pleasure of annexing their properties. And then just very briefly, the pie chart showing revenues. Property taxes are still 29% of the overall budget, and then our variable taxes coming in strong with the H tax, A tax, and the sales tax making up 27% total. So that just kind of gives you an idea of where the money's coming from. So those are revenues. Any last questions on revenues before we get into how we propose to spend the money?
Yeah, let's take 5.
I'm gonna blow through a lot of